Hi everybody, I'm Spike Brave, and today I'd like to give you a look at the Crimson Strait map in Mechwarrior Online. I'm doing these videos to show players, new players, or maybe even existing players, how these maps are used in solo play, and some of the place names that are used to refer to the locations on this map that may not be grid coordinates. And since we're talking about grid coordinates, let's talk about grid coordinates. So, as you can see, I have a little mini map in the center of my screen at the bottom, and there's a yellow triangle in it. Or maybe that's tan, depending on how you perceive that color, but whatever. That is my battle mech. That's where I'm located, and you can see I'm in grid B6, right on the line of B5 there. So that's a good way to communicate to your team. So keep this in mind that if you see something, you can let your teammates know exactly where it is by saying, hey, it's in grid C6, C6, whatever, or just type in, hey, they're in B6. If you want more information about the battlefield, hit your B key, and that'll bring up the entire grid of the entire map. And as you can see, I'm still denoted on that map up there in B6. And if I was detecting enemy mechs, they would show up here. If there were friendly units, they would show up here. And anything that they were detecting would also show up here. So this is a good way to get a look at the battlefield and communicate to people what's going on and where it's going on. So let's talk about the map itself and how it's used and some of the place names that are used by players. There's not a lot of place names. In fact, there's only really one. Well, two. And we'll talk about those when we get there. And of course, we'll talk about some of the things that players call this map, and I've heard it referred to as Kool-Aid Strait, because if we look out at the water there, it looks like red Kool-Aid. So, that being said, let's talk about how this map works and where we see things. This is the one of the base locations, so you'll see turrets in these buildings. And actually, as far as turrets go on this map, you'll see a ton of them throughout the area that extends along the C line here, or not the C line, but the 5 and 6 lines, all the way back up over to an area that they call the saddle in between these two hills. And I'll take a closer look at that in a little bit. But keep an eye out as you're running through here that the turrets are mainly in this direction, on top of buildings, in between buildings. So keep an eye out for that. So there's a base here to capture or defend, depending on which team you are. And in Conquest, this will also be a capture point. So let's spend a look at that. And let's go this way first. So nothing exciting here, but usually the team that starts down in this location, kind of on the 6 line, and a little bit through here too as well for the starting location, but they'll run up through here, and they'll either come down to this tunnel right here, and we'll stop and take a look at these mechs. See, as I detect them, they show up. So I wasn't seeing him before, but there he is right at the corner of B4 and B3. And as I detect them, I can see them. So if I switch back, I can no longer see that Victor, so I'm not detecting him. So that's how that works and how you can communicate that information. But as I said, people start out and they'll either run through this area, which is just some buildings. There's good cover throughout here. Or they'll push over and go into this tunnel that's over here that cuts through this mountain. And we'll go down in there and we'll show you where that is. Both these areas provide good cover for LRMs as you're getting set up, and good areas to dig in, so either one is a good way to start the match. And then here's this tunnel, and this cuts all the way through up into the parking deck area and the saddle, and we'll go there in just a moment. And then of course it comes out here too. So there's a couple ways to use that tunnel, so keep that in mind. And what we'll do is we'll go over to the next capture point here. This hill here does provide some good cover if you're a sniper or have LRMs and you want to fight somebody that's got up over there on that parking deck, and we'll take a closer look at that as well. But that's a good spot to use as well. So let's get over to that next point of interest, which is a capture point, and it's over in B1. And it'll take me just a second to get there. So this area will be, you'll see some fighting in here occasionally during Conquest because there's a capture point right here. So keep that in mind. So capture point here, and then some fighting in those buildings, but not usually. And occasionally somebody will run off in there, try to hide if you're pushing down from that parking deck into this area. If the other team is here trying to dig in and you manage to push them out, they may go back in there to get some help. Something that is used rather infrequently, it used to be used all the time, but not anymore, is this island here, and sometimes you'll hear that sniper on the island. So what they've done is they've come down here into this area because there's this big spire here you can hide behind, and they're trying to shoot into that parking deck area again. So let's get toward to see that a little better. So there we go. They're trying to shoot into this area here. You don't see it a lot anymore. It's not a great location. It does provide you some cover and a good view of this area. So if you're spotting, you can see some stuff, but it's not a great spot. You're kind of cut off. You're not near anything that's important to the maps. So you don't see it a lot, but occasionally you see somebody out here hiding, trying to shoot PPCs or LRMs or Gauss rifles into that area. So keep that in mind. Not very frequent, but people do use it. And then the next place that's interesting is over here in F1. So right here, a little bit hard to find it without the it being on the map, but in this general area, it's either right here or it's right here. Actually, I believe it's both now that I'm looking at it. Right here is where the capture point is in Conquest. So kind of by this tree here. And then if we go over just a little bit deeper into F2, in between the buildings right here would be where the base is located. So keep that in mind. In this general vicinity will be a base or a capture point. So base here though, and then the capture point by that tree over there. So you'll see some fighting in this area, and the turrets are located throughout on the F line mainly, a couple in E3, but mainly here in F2 and then in E3. So not a horrible spread on those. Something that you may want to be aware of is there is quite a bit of distance if you can run out here. So if you're playing Conquest and you need a little bit of a place to hide, let's say you've got all the bases captured and you need a few minutes or a few seconds just to get those extra couple bases and they're chasing you, coming up in here, there's nothing real spectacular up here. It's just the side of the hill, but it does offer a light mech a good spot to hide if you're trying to get those last few points on capture and they're chasing you. So keep that in mind. Good place to hide throughout here. Not a lot of people look up on this hill or back in this area, so keep that in mind. You might be able to use that to your advantage. And then we'll run towards the parking deck here. That's really the last place where there's a lot of stuff going on, and that's usually where the bulk of the match takes place. So nothing spectacular here though, just some buildings to hide in. There might be a few turrets if you're playing Conquest, so keep an eye out. And then there's this parking deck, and they call it the parking deck, the garage, things like that to indicate what it is. And a lot of times you'll hear they're under, which means they've gotten underneath and they're trying to attack the players that are up here. So keep that in mind. You might hear they're under. So if you're up here and you hear under, that means they're down here. And there's holes in the parking deck where you can shoot down into it if that is advantageous to you. So right here is a capture point if you're playing Conquest, and that's generally what happens. Is the team that starts out where I started out will take the Theta capture point and the Epsilon capture point, which is down on the other side of this deck, and I'll show you where that is. And these players tend to try to take this, that start out over here by the other base, tend to try to take this capture location. And then the other thing that's really important about here is this. This is what they call the saddle, or the pass, or the gap. And what's interesting about this map is the turrets for this base start right about where that building I'm pointing at, about 500 meters away, is. So the turrets are quite spread out in this location, so keep that in mind. If you pass through the saddle here going to capture this base in assault mode, you'll run into turrets almost immediately coming down here. And we'll take a look what's down here. It's just a general city area, some buildings to hide in between. The turrets, although there are quite a few and they do extend quite a ways, because of all the buildings, really don't have a huge impact on you're not going to be getting shot at by like 15 turrets at once. There's only a couple that can shoot at you when you're down in this area, which is why I believe they've extended them so far, because it's easy to hide from them. But nothing spectacular in here. You do see some fighting in here when both teams decide that they want to use the saddle to their advantage. So one team will line up here, and then one team will line up on top of the parking deck, and they'll start peeking over at each other and taking pot shots at each other. So that happens quite frequently, so be aware of that. And sometimes you'll get a base rush or similar behavior. The one team that starts out over here will just push right through the saddle and off they go, trying to attack the base that's over here or capture that capture point that's there. So keep an eye on that. Let's go under and look and see what's under there. So nothing real spectacular. It's just the underside of a parking deck. Does provide good cover from LRMs, artillery strikes and such. And here's where that tunnel comes out. So this is the area where most players fight over, so you'll see this a lot. So keep that in mind, and then we'll go to the other side of the deck here, and where this bridge comes down is where the last capture point is, and that's going to be right here. So that's been a look at this map. There's not a lot of horribly exciting stuff that goes on. Generally, people either line up to fight over the saddle or push through the tunnel and fight over the parking deck, and then the other team just defends that area. And that's generally how it's used in solo play. So I just wanted to give you a look at this map, what some players call some things, so that if they're yelling there at the saddle, you know where they're at without going where, and leading to a communication breakdown, which is a large portion of the reason I've been doing these videos, is to let players know what people are saying and what that means. So, but not a lot of place names. All we have here is the saddle underneath the deck, or under, and of course there's a sniper on the island, but as I said, you probably won't see that very often. But that's been a look at this map. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's taught you how this map is being used in some of the place names at least, and I hope you have great luck on the battlefield, and I hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.